Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Rodriguez. I'm Assistant Director, as Vana mentioned, with the Building Electrification Institute. I previously worked in city government as well as a community organizer. I was also a community organizer, so I bring that into this building electrification work that I do with BEI. BEI works with 12 cities across the country to support their transition away from fossil fuels through developing equitable decarbonization and policies and programming. We have 4 cities in California, 2 in the Bay, but this presentation will draw from our experiences working in this space nationally. Equity is an important component of the work that we do, whether it be co-creation with frontline communities, equitable policy design, or nexus issues that intersect with building electrification. Today, I'll be discussing affordable housing. This presentation will cover basic understanding of affordable housing affordability, give a brief background on the history of affordable housing crisis we face in our cities today. And I'll close with explaining why it is important to lead with equity in building electrification in order to prevent further housing displacement and provide some example policies to consider. Before we dive into housing affordability and building electrification, I just wanted to cover some basics about why we need to decarbonize our buildings to begin with. Over 70 million homes and businesses currently burn fossil fuels, including natural gas, oil, and propane. In many cities, direct fuel use in buildings accounts for anywhere between 15 and 40% of total citywide emissions. We need to do everything we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to deal with the climate crisis. Decarbonizing buildings will be an important step towards meeting GHG reduction goals. Building electrification also leads to better health and safety outcomes. Homes and gas appliances, for example, are linked to poor indoor air quality. Homes with gas stoves, children with have a 42% increased risk of developing asthma. Another sort of part of this is the 3 out of 5 fires in U.S. properties are caused by gas, propane, and other flammable liquids, about 200,000 cases per year. So underscores the need for, why B could, deal with some of those, some of that. Building electrification also mitigates the impact of heat waves through high efficiency cooling. As many of you may know, climate change is causing heat waves and hotter seasons. And in cities is exacerbated by urban heat island effect. This affects low-income communities and communities of color disproportionately, as they typically lack central heating and lack central cooling. Air source heat pumps do provide a high efficiency cooling option. Heat pumps also reduce building gas energy for most customers. Wide-scale deployment of heat pumps may increase total energy use, total electricity use, but it decreases economy-wide energy use overall. This is because heat pump technologies are so energy efficient. This would also result in overall energy less energy costs. There's also an opportunity to rectify economic and racial injustices that are caused by a lack of affordable housing and disproportionate effect of the climate crisis on BIPOC and low-income communities. We'll transition now into establishing a working definition of housing affordability and introduce some key concepts to set some foundation. BEI's working definition of affordable housing is high quality, healthy homes in which all-in costs fit within a household's budget and do not force residents to make choices between critical needs, such as food, utilities, and childcare. Some people think of affordable housing as only regulations and restrictions. And we believe affordability should be based on residents' ability to pay for good quality housing. Affordable housing is typically separated into 2 categories, one being regulated affordable housing, another unregulated. Regulated affordable housing is regulated by government program to restrict rents or restrict allowable resident incomes to maintain affordability. Regulated affordable housing falls into four categories, as I listed here. Subsidized affordable housing receives tax credits, grants, or loans in exchange for restrictions on rents. This often also includes restrictions on allowable income levels for residents. This includes high-tech properties, which is one of the biggest sources of affordable housing funding and financing. Rental assistance housing, also known as Section 8, receives funding for rent payment assistance and is typically delivered directly to tenants. Rent-controlled housing, also known as rent stabilization, places restrictions on how much rents can be increased annually, regardless of subsidy or income of the tenant. And public housing is publicly owned and operated for income qualified residents. On the flip side, what we call unregulated affordable housing, what others may call naturally occurring or NOAA, is housing that is priced below local average market rate and or is affordable to existing residents, but is not subject to regulations restricting rents or incomes. Unregulated affordable housing may be located in lower income areas, often historically redlined, which I'll explain a little bit later, with fewer high quality services and resources, which can create and exacerbate existing inequities for residents. Unregulated affordable housing may also be located in high income and gentrifying areas and may be linked to and may be currently undervalued, which poses a threat to the continued affordability due to market forces. There's a lack of good data on this affordable and on this housing stock, but it generally makes up a substantial portion of housing in cities. I'd like to note that without regulation, that means that the price can change at any time. It also means that affordable housing may be of poor quality, unsafe, and not up to code, with tenants fearful of calling landlords for these conditions. And just want to underscore as well that this disproportionately affects lower income people. So when we talk about building upgrades, there's high risk for them to be displaced. And in gentrifying areas, unregulated affordable units are often first to be targeted when amenities increase and retrofits are made to the property. Now we've covered some foundational pieces to discuss what affordable housing is. Let's talk about how cities got here. It's important to recognize that concentrations of housing cost burdens are in metro areas. These cost burdens are not accidental or naturally occurring. They are a result of years of racist policies such as redlining. If you're unfamiliar with what redlining is, I assume some may be familiar with that, but it's a practice in which federal lending agencies historically assigned neighborhoods in major cities a race-based classification system to encourage investment in predominantly white communities and discourage or prohibit investment in communities of color. Beginning in the 1950s and 60s, lasting well into the 90s, there's a compounding trend of suburban white flight, which drained white people out of cities and into suburbs. In recent years, these trends have shifted, and cities are experiencing major population growth. We haven't yet built enough housing to accommodate these new residents, so this is dramatically rising housing costs and lower housing cost areas, which happen to be the very same areas that people of color were forced to live in. This process is often called gentrification, which, because we don't have the protections in place for existing residents, is leading to massive displacement. And we now have a displacement crisis playing out in many of our cities. In some cities, housing costs are rising so quickly in areas that used to be affordable that this is causing widespread displacement. It's particularly in communities of color, for example. On the slide, I have two examples, Greater Boston and Alameda County. The Bay Area has experienced massive displacement of people of color. In the East Bay, about at least 60,000 African Americans were displaced between the years 2000 and 2015. An example of one of our cities, that we work with. South and West Berkeley lost 40% of its Black population between the years 2000 and 2017. Now let's go a little deeper into the health and safety ramifications for people living in affordable housing. There are often trade-offs, especially as it relates to building electrification, as affordable housing has the highest instances of health and safety violations. Between 20 to 60% of affordable homes are deferred from federal weatherization programs and utility low-income energy efficiency programs due to health and safety repairs. Energy upgrade programs often do not reach low-income housing, and landlords may also use health and safety hazards as a way to force tenants they want to evict out in order to charge higher rents. Another important reason to think about housing affordability as it relates to building electrification is that upgrades could exacerbate the crisis. The table on the slide is a study from a city in the Northeast that finds that depending on how landlord chooses to pass on upgrade costs, the rent could be anywhere between $50 to $250 per month. Rent increase could be anywhere between $50 to $250 per month. Building owners may choose to recoup upgrade and higher utility costs by increasing rents. Upgrades can also displace tenants during construction or lead to unfair evictions or displacement. I'd like to note, so the energy bill savings are also important. We do need to make sure that building electrification upgrades in affordable housing do not do not increase bills for those who can't afford it. In our analysis, that this is often achievable through a combination of weatherization and on-site solar. However, these upgrades will increase upfront costs of a retrofit. Housing affordability is complex. It could be its own deep dive, along with even deeper conversations. Some of you may be familiar with the 3 Ps, but I'll share what they are in case. This framework you see on the slide is one we found is helpful. Housing advocates often refer to the 3 Ps as what's needed to holistically solve housing, gentrification, and displacement crisis. They are to protect residents, ensure residents are not, renters are not unnecessarily forced out of their homes, to preserve housing that is currently, ensure housing that is currently affordable and remains affordable to those who live there, and producing more affordable housing that serves all income levels to accommodate new residents. We've spent some time laying the foundation for housing affordability because there are real challenges, as well as opportunities as it relates to building electrification. The opportunities for jurisdictions include enacting strong citywide and regional tenant protection regimes, preserving existing affordable housing by funding electrification and energy upgrades and preventing housing cost and rent increases, and enabling the development of all-electric, affordable, and missing middle housing. We know that building decarb policies can cause rent increases, tenant displacement, and unfair evictions. Trying to protect against this within a given policy is a bit like playing whack-a-mole without such strong city regional protection regime in place. Some example policies could include just cause eviction policies and ensuring enforcement of existing tenant protections. If you're unaware of what just cause eviction policies are, they protect tenants and prevent landlords from evicting tenants for no reason.
Hey, Eric.
Yep.
I just wanted to do a quick time check. I have about 5 minutes remaining.
Yep. Thank you. In addition to protecting residents who may face displacement or eviction, it will be critical to help preserve existing affordable housing and prevent housing costs from rising further. At a minimum, we'd like to make sure that energy bills don't go up. And we want to make sure that capital costs required to upgrade buildings are not passed on to low-income renters. Ideally, we can go just beyond just this and preserve more affordable housing across the board. To ensure upgrades and result in energy bill savings, some example programs and policies include launching technical assistance programs to help building owners combine upgrades that will ensure building bill savings and to help them stack relevant funding sources, and advocating for favorable rate design for electrification at the state and utility level. We also want to ensure capital cost upgrades are not passed on to low and moderate income renters and residents. We want more funding for all types of housing upgrades across the board, including electrification upgrades. Ideally, this should be tied to restrictions on increasing rents and housing costs wherever possible. Some examples can include providing public funding for renters and homeowners, and preserving existing affordable housing. Preserving expanding homes under affordable housing regulations is another strategy, and you can see more examples on the slide, but we do want to think bigger than this. We also we should align with housing policy advocates to proactively bring more unregulated affordable housing under regulation and directly fund energy upgrades as a part of the process. Another opportunity is to enable the development of all electric, affordable, and missing middle housing. One key strategy here is to enact an all electric reach code, which many jurisdictions already have. From there, you should work to support your housing department and housing advocates' goals around expanding the supply of new affordable housing. There's a lot of innovation happening in this space. I have some example policies listed here. Bringing everything I discussed today together, we can solve for both housing affordability and building electrification, but we need substantially more funding for any of this to be possible. We will need to work across intersections and work closely with local housing department and housing advocates. Because they tend to have major goals and priorities that they are working towards. We want to align with that work and not against it or silo it away from it. We also want to enact programs and policies that work to simplify and streamline the retrofit process and ability to access new funding. The complexity in and of itself can be a major barrier and driver of costs, and could put local POP owners out of business. We've seen some cities do exciting work in this nexus to break down barriers, so we know that there's some models to follow out there. I'd like to thank you all for your engagement, and BayREN for reaching out to us. I'm happy to follow up with questions you may have at my email that I've listed on my slide. Thank you.